I promise no one else is in this frame. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. I am really excited. This is the first time that I'm giving this talk, so all of that she just mentioned about giving feedback, please do send it to me. I would really love to hear your feedback so that I can make this better. We are here to talk about change management in large initiatives. If this is not where you were planning to be, feel free to get up and take this time now. You're not going to offend me by going to another place. All right? I had a really nice intro, which saves me a lot of details, so let me just skip to the part where I say, you can find me on LinkedIn, Tamara, T-A-M-A-R-A, Koppel is C-O-P-P-L-E, from Kansas City. My face is on my profile, so I'm easy to find. I work for Children International, as she mentioned. We are a nonprofit based in Kansas City, Missouri, and our mission is to help eliminate child poverty. And we do that with the help of supporters like you, by giving our kids access to medical services, to education, to empowerment opportunities like financial literacy programs, and by helping to make them employable so that by the time they turn 18, they are very well equipped and empowered to break that cycle of poverty for their families. I can talk about Children International all day, honestly. This was my first trip down to one of our agencies, happened last November. I went to Guatemala, and I got to see firsthand what life is like for some of our sponsored kids. So, that's not the rabbit hole that I want to go down today, though. Ask me about that afterwards, because I have lots of photos, all right? So instead, let's talk about you for just a second. I like to kick things off by finding out what made you decide to come to this room as opposed to the one at the other end of the building or the one next door. So I would love to hear what you had told yourself you were going to get out of this session today so that I can write that down. And if I can hit those points for you, I want to make sure that we meet your expectations. Anybody want to volunteer? What brought you here? Mike?
I want to hear some tips and tricks of what worked and what didn't work with your change management.
Okay. What worked and didn't? I have sloppy handwriting, just so you know.
As long as you can read it.
That's the important thing, right? What else?
How to conquer large initiatives.
How to conquer large initiatives. Conquering. I hope I spelled that right. If not, it's on video forever.
The 18-month horizon, how to get something passed like 2 budget cycles.
I love that so much. Okay, I'm jingling, I can't do that. The 18-month horizon, I'm glad you mentioned that because I have something to say about it. All right, what else? Yes, in the back.
How you fuel yourself to make it through that marathon.
Oh my God, so much coffee. Fueling yourself, not burning out. Awesome. I think I saw another hand up.
How do you keep your stakeholders engaged during that whole process?
That we will cover for sure. Keeping stakeholders engaged. Engaged. Okay, what else?
Well, I'm trying to piggyback off of hers. It's just getting that buy-in, right, on the change management process.
Buy-in, okay. There we go. Anyone else? I'm okay with this list, but I'm always happy to add more to it. Okay. Well, in that case, let's talk about what I also put on the agenda. So this is sort of what I had in mind when I was making this talk up. Actually, let's move this on to the side. So first of all, I would love for you to leave here today understanding why change management needs to be baked into the cake from day one of whatever process or initiative it is that you're kicking off. Second, understand why the plan that you think you're going to start with, that extremely well planned out document, is not going to survive. It will change. So just reconcile yourself to that now. And then finally, I love techniques. So I would love for you to leave here with something very specific and tangible that you can go back and try with your organization. So with that in mind, I am also going to try and come back to all of these points as well. If by the end of the presentation, I haven't actually hit it to your satisfaction, be sure to raise your hand and hold me accountable for it, because I will try to answer those. And you've made it easy, because most of that is somewhere in my talk. What this will not be about is the psychology of resistance. So with any change management, you've got the who moved my cheese, the people who don't want to do this, the naysayers, the negative influencers. I'm not going to talk about the negative psychology that goes into that. I think there's another talk that is happening on that today for that purpose. I'm not trying to ignore it, but I do want to concentrate on those techniques that get to that buy-in that we talked about. Okay, so with that in mind, let's start with a little context. By the time that I started working for Children International in late 2018, we were using 3 different major customer relationship management systems. The first 2 were implemented sometime around 2009. They were called Aptify. One was version 3.5 and one was version 4.5. And not too long after we implemented those, the vendor was bought out by a bigger fish, and they said, congratulations, Aptify 3.5 is built on Visual Basic 6. We need you to convert everything over to .NET now, or you no longer have support. We didn't have the money to do it because we pretty much drained our resources and committed everything we wanted by the time that we implemented Aptify 3.5, so we parted ways. And at that point, our development teams began heavily customizing the product that we had. And we continued to use it and leverage it and tease the heck out of it until we Frankensteined it into a monster and continued to use it. Eventually, we decided we needed to get off of Aptify 3.5. And so we tried to implement 4.5. Aptify 4.5 ended up only being installed for our agencies. And then a few years later again, we decided, no, this is really not working for us. We need to go with something completely different. Bring in Dynamics on premises. So by the time I arrived in 2018, we're using Aptify 3.5 for our sponsor donor management. We're using Aptify 4.5 for all our child and field operations, and we're using Dynamics for our philanthropy and for some of our case management work. And we have to keep all 3 of those in sync. They're all held together with duct tape, Band-Aids, and spit. And at any moment, it could all come crashing down. This is what I walked into. Now, at the beginning of 2019, interestingly enough, we talked about bringing in a whole new system. Let's go through this BPR process again. There's no way that we can stay on Aptify any longer. On-prem didn't work for us. We need to move off of Dynamics. What are we going to do? But naturally, by that point, everyone was traumatized. The whole organization was traumatized from 3 major failed BPR efforts, business process reengineering, just to make sure I hit that at least once. So the first thing to overcome was, do we even want to go through this again? So we hit pain point number 1. The entire organization had to be in pain from the first moment, from the top to the bottom. Everyone had to be feeling it enough to the point where they wanted to make a change, right? So we started in 2019 with a year of vendor discussions. How are we going to do this? How are we going to pay for it? All of that, right? And we decided to kick things off. The board ultimately approved the project. And then they said, we're gonna kick this off in March 2020. Yeah. So, March 2020, everyone has just not come back to the office from spring break. And we decided to kick this entire initiative off by Teams. So everyone gets on a Teams meeting. And our CEO has pre-recorded a video message for us. Susanna is wonderful. She said, this is going to be a very long and very difficult road. It's a marathon, not a sprint. This is going to take years for us to implement. So everyone in the organization needs to understand this is going to be slow, and you're not going to start to see change in volume for a long time. Give yourselves grace. Be kind to one another. Pay attention to your mental health, especially because it's 2020 and hashtag world's dumpster fire. And she said, that's okay. We can manage this. We are going to get through this together. And so she set the tone right from the start. And that was the second piece. The CEO was the one delivering that message, and the CEO was saying, give each other grace. The CEO was the one who was saying, I expect this to take a long time. Now, to your point earlier about the 18-month hurdle, for those who aren't aware of the statistic, 70% or more of large initiatives of this size fail within the first 18 to 24 months. And there's lots of reasons for that. So here it is. This is now May 2023. This initiative is about 65% done 3 years into this, and we're still going. There is a push for us to be done with this initiative by the end of the year, and many differing opinions on whether or not that's going to be a realistic deadline or not, but that's another story altogether. We are all pushing towards finishing this project, but it's going to take us 4 years to get there. And it's not going to be pretty by the time we do. The point was to get to the end, and it's functional. It's not a Cadillac. It's your baseline Model T Ford. It's not your Cadillac. It's definitely not a Porsche, right? So setting expectations was another big thing. So as we began thinking about change management in this context, I really started noticing immediately how much similarity there is between our definition of business analysis, which at this point everybody should know by heart, right? Because that's what we do. And what that would look like in an OCM context. You don't have to change the definition much. If business analysis is all about the practice of enabling change, right? By defining your needs and recommending solutions, just add OCM in a couple of places. Organizational change management, then, is the practice of enabling change by defining your change management needs and then moving those into the context of your project and supporting the OCM solutions. So what are organizational change management needs? In this case, that means getting to the finish line without everyone feeling completely traumatized. Because the reason we waited so long to even undergo this current initiative is because everyone had such bad PTSD from the first 3 failed attempts. And why wouldn't they, right? I mean, why wouldn't they have PTSD? So that led me to start thinking about chapter 3 of the BABOK, which everybody's like, oh yeah, okay, this is all about planning how you're going to get there, right? Again, there's a lot of chapter 3 that is extremely relevant to this whole process. Now, you'll see that I left out 3.3 deliberately because it really is pretty business analysis specific. But in this case, the path is pretty similar. Plan how you're going to approach the change management, right? And then you're going to be planning how you're going to engage all those stakeholders, to another point that we talked about here. And then third, we're going to plan the information management, which are all of the ways that we are going to communicate as business analysis professionals alongside our product owners and our product managers and our project managers and all of the people who are involved with the project. And then as we go, identify performance improvements. And I'm here to tell you that even if you work in a waterfall environment, which is still a thing, you can still iterate within the context of your own role, within the context of change management. As you discover something works, why keep it till the end? In this area in particular, within a large initiative, you have the opportunity to improve things as you go. If you see something that's not working, change it. Try something else, try a new approach. All right, so let's deep dive into this. Let's talk for a minute about you again. I would like a volunteer to tell me, what is the way that you learn best? How do you absorb information most easily? Yeah?
Visual cues.
Visual cues, okay, that's a great one. Who else?
Doing it.
Doing it, getting in there and getting your hands on it, right. Any others?
I prefer a list of like bullet points of a process,
Checklists.
and then I do it from there, and that's how I.
Right. The point being, people learn in different ways and they absorb information in different ways and at different rates. So part of the art of change management and the science of change management is to meet people where they are and to start figuring out, how does my audience, and there's going to be a lot of different audiences, how does this audience respond best to the information that I want to share with them? Some people can absorb it just by reading an article. Some people have to listen to a podcast. Some people have to talk it out with a partner. Some people actually have to get in and they get their hands dirty and do the work and try it out. So in a good change management effort, you want to try and think of a multidisciplinary or multisensory approach to the way that you're going to introduce your change. Because as we all know as business analysts, the longer an email we write, the less likely it is to get read. So now that we want to think about, we know generally, people are going to learn differently. So who are the people? So who might be our stakeholders at Children International, or even within your own organization? What are some categories of stakeholders that you might have in one of these large initiatives? Sponsors?
I mean, I see a few. We have clients, we have people who do the work, the supervisors have to manage the work. There's probably more, but that's.
Oh, there's a lot of them. So let's start at the top. Let's talk about the board for a second. Who gets together once a quarter and says, you want us to pay what for this? That's the first thing you've got to convince, right? Why are we doing this again? So as soon as you get past the board, the next thing you have is your project sponsors. Your project sponsors are ultimately accountable to the board for making sure that the work gets done and gets done right, within time, on time and on budget, even more so than the project manager, right? We've got our business owners, who are, from a strategic perspective, the people on the team who are going to know the most about where the business is going, because the board and the project sponsors have given them the direction. This is where we want the company to go in the next 5 years. Get us there, right? We've got the project team, and they're going to be the doers. They're going to be the most intimately involved with all of this. And they care too what message is getting out about the work that they're doing. There's all the uninvolved middle managers who at some point are going to receive an email saying, all of your employees need training by X date. Make sure that they get signed up for it. Okay. As a manager, what do I tell my employee when they say, what is this thing that we're doing, right? How have we prepared those people who have not been as involved in the project? We've got the individual contributors. In my case, that might be our care team representatives who are taking calls from our sponsors day in, day out. They're not going to get involved until we have a tool to train them on, because we don't want to train them too early and then them have to forget everything, and then have to retrain them again when we go live with the new system. Again, reducing the trauma. And then finally, we have customers, and you were right on board with that. In the case of Children International, they should never know this is happening. We do not want our kids to be affected. We do not want our families to know about it. We do not want our sponsors to know about it, because it should remain a smooth and pleasant experience for them. This is all for the benefit of our internal operations, to help make our internal operations more efficient, ultimately, so that we can send more money to the agencies and get more kids help. Because this entire BPR initiative for us is about recognizing efficiencies so that we can do more good in the world and stop spending it at the home office. So the next part of this is about planning your information management. In 7th grade, they taught me how to write a basic journal article. Answer those questions: who, what, why, where, when, how. If you can get through that list and think about each of those stakeholder groups, who needs this message? Who needs a different message? How are we going to communicate to this? You never send the same email to the board or the CEO that you send to the individual contributors. Each audience needs their own customized message in their own way. And then the final piece of this is, let's talk about performance improvements. No matter how elaborate a plan you come up with at the very beginning, it is not going to survive first contact with reality. So be prepared to shift. I cannot begin to tell you how many times in the last 3 years we've had a plan, we've been executing on a particular communication strategy, and some uninvolved middle manager comes back to us and said, well, that's not what I heard, or I never got that message, or I feel like I'm being left out of the loop and I don't feel very good about that, right? All of these things sound familiar, right? So when that happens, it's time to take a pause and say, okay, one, who is saying this? And at what level do they fall within the spectrum of those stakeholders? Okay, now we've identified that individual stakeholder group. What are the messages that we are sending to that stakeholder? And have they been getting those messages? Are we sending mixed messages ourselves? Or is the piece of information they say they're getting or not getting, whatever it happens to be at the time, is that coming from someplace other than the communication strategy that we are in control of? So you begin to do a little detective work and work your way back. Where did this actually come from? And we're going to assume good intention, that they really didn't hear or that they really did feel left out, and not that they're just whining for the sake of whining, right? Because there's always a few of those. Let's assume good intent. So we're going to go back and we're going to try and figure out where that came from. And once we understand the root cause, #technique, root cause analysis. Once we understand where that came from, then we can go about figuring out, well, how do we need to change that message? Is it getting out in the right way? Do we need to change the way that we're delivering it? I'm saying a lot of change the message. I'm going to get to those techniques in just a second, because I'm all about the hard stuff. So no matter what you do, nothing's going to be perfect. Which is why I say, even in a waterfall effort where everything seems to be planned out from the beginning, be ready to pivot. If you need to change your email frequency from 1 month to every 2 weeks, great. If you need to change it to every 3 weeks, whatever it happens to be. If you need to go from an email to a video message, you can do that too. There's all kinds of different ways that you can adjust. Just be prepared to do it. So now we get to the fun part. So here are some of the things that we have done at Children International that I think are really helping to keep us going in the same direction. The first one is cascading messages. The idea of a cascading message is something that is specifically started at the very top of the food chain, at the CEO level, and is expected to trickle down. That you want to get from the CEO down into the director level, down into the manager level, and they're supposed to be sharing it in their meetings. And then you keep your ears open, because we business analysts tend to be individual contributors, and as long as we're individual contributors, we're much closer to that baseline. So if by the time we rehear that message from our colleagues, it's not the same message that we told the CEO that we needed them to send, okay, now we can go back and figure out, we start working our way backwards. How did that change? But a cascading message is designed to come from the CEO specifically to reinforce what we want to get accomplished. This is a great thing. You know, the project team just moved the first batch of kids onto the new system. Rah, rah, here we go. We need the CEO to celebrate so that everyone else knows it's time to celebrate too, right? Yes, you have a question?
How detailed are the cascading messages? In my organization, it's one sentence, and as a PA, I don't find much value in it, but what do you guys have for cascading messages? How much detail?
In our context, the cascading messages are given verbally. They're shared in a monthly KPI update meeting. So here's the message, but you have the opportunity, CEO, director, ask me questions. What additional information would you find useful? This is the punchline. How you want to deliver it is up to you. I would be glad to help you craft that message. Does that help?
Thank you.
Okay. For your benefit, and by the way, don't feel like you have to copiously write notes, because I'm going to include a QR code at the end of this so you can go directly to the slides. They will have live hyperlinks, which is why I put them in here. Cascading messages, does it ever work? Is a blog, and again, cascading change is another resource that you can read afterwards. I'm also a big person on additional sources. I generally don't have any new material. I'm synthesizing what other people have discovered first, so I want to give credit where credit is due. Second technique, the idea of project champions. So, in short, a champion is a cheerleader. These are individuals who are not necessarily involved with the project itself, right? They're the influencers, and the Babok talks about that. These are the people who are without power, but with influence, right? They don't necessarily have direct reports, but they're the ones who tend to be the early adopters of whatever the new process is or the new technology. So who makes a good project champion? In our case, we have had really good luck finding individual contributors who are on our front lines, and that means members of our care team. They are the ones that are in our CRM every single day. They are members of our agency staff, our field officers who are doing the case management work and gathering child photos and collecting sponsor letters day in, day out. They are right there on the front lines. So they're going to be the ones who will make or break the success of this tool. We need them to be on board more than we need anybody else in the organization to be on board with this. This is for them and for their benefit. So if we can find individuals on the front line, then those are the people that we want to get on our side. What do they get out of this? These are individuals who may not have been promoted yet, but are beginning to show signs of being promotable because of their leadership skills within their own teams at the individual contributor level. These are individuals, as I said, who are early adopters, who are like, yeah, I'll give this a try. They're subject matter experts who know intimately well what is broken and what they would love to see fixed, right? They are people that their manager might have an opportunity to give greater exposure to throughout the organization. So this is an opportunity for exposure. So anytime you're in a position where I'd like to stay with this company, but I just don't know anything about this other department, I wonder if that would be something I'd be interested in. This is an opportunity for that kind of a person to get that exposure. So we have pulled those individuals in. And their role is, like a good online game goes through beta testing periods, before Halo comes out or the next version of D&D, they ask for beta testers. All of the development has been done, all of the unit testing has been done, and to the best of the project team's ability, they have a working product. Beta testers go in and say, okay, how can I farkle with this? They're the ones that are gonna say, okay, let's see if it meets the stress tests, right? That's what our project champions become. They get early access into what's coming down the line, so that when they get that cascading message from the CEO, they can add, oh yeah, and I saw that new interface. The way that we're gonna register kids in the future is gonna take 10 times less time than it does today. It's gonna be way more efficient than it is now. And they are cheering for us. They're putting out the good word. And they're saying back to us, hey, you know what? The way that you constructed to do child photos just is nonsensical to me. I can't upload 100 child photos using that process that you gave me, and here's why. I happen to work in an agile environment, so we have that ability to pivot when we get strong feedback. We do have that ability to pivot and go back and revisit some things. But even if you're in waterfall and you don't have that ability, at least now you're aware that there's an issue that you're going to have to manage expectations around. So you still have an opportunity to learn from that session and from that feedback, right? The next one I'm going to give full credit to my coworker Andrea for. She is also one of the most brilliant business analysts who is self-taught that I have ever met. She came up with the idea of sprint accomplishments. Now, this is a pretty simple document. At the end of every iteration, she writes down what did we accomplish, who it's going to benefit, the difference between the new experience and the old experience, right? Because you're going to get that question. Terminology changes, why it was important that we do that particular user story or that particular feature, and how do you do it? Because as the product owner, she needs to be able to demo that to the business. She's taking all of this in her own shorthand, meaning this is not a document that's ever going to be read by the public. It is going to be read by other members of the project team. And the project team, as a group, is responsible for different aspects of communicating out the change. So the way this works, and COPE stands for Create Once, Publish Everywhere. It's a marketing term, and usually they mean it, you write one set of copy and then you put a snippet of it on Twitter and you put a longer version on LinkedIn and you add a photo and you put it on Instagram. That's what COPE is for the marketing world. For us, this means that you start with that basic shorthand document that the technical team understands how to read, right? You've got all these basic questions answered, and then you can begin to abstract that out into lots of different levels. So we start out, first of all, with our intranet site. At the end of every iteration, we have a SharePoint site, and we talk about what did we get accomplished, so that we hold ourselves accountable to the rest of the organization. Does anyone read the intranet site? Good question. If we give them a reason to, yes. So, how do we do that? We do video clips. The how part of that, Andrea turns into, or other people can turn into, a 3-minute video to say, here's how you upload a child photo in the new system. 3 minutes. We want to try and keep it short, right? We can upload that and put that on the intranet site so that anyone can see this is the new piece of functionality that we developed, and they can go click on that video and it's re-demoed to them every single time they click on it. Right? It helps us fill out our release notes, which is something that as an organization we really want to get better at, so that we know when this was implemented, and why it was implemented. The other questions from a very subjective standpoint will help us communicate the holistic message to the rest of the organization. We hired a change management consultant, and at the end of each sprint, she takes all of that shorthand information and she turns it into beautifully written copy that we can then share, because the product owners are busy moving on to the next thing, right? So that helps with the release notes. And then finally, all of that detail eventually gets cleaned up and goes into our knowledge base articles, which unfortunately tend to be the very last thing that we do, and they're also the first thing to get dropped when we're busy and we move on. But if we need to come back to them later on down the road, we have Andrea's Sprint Accomplishment Doc to go back to. And there are more product owners than there were at the beginning, so now we are all collectively taking responsibility for completing that, because now instead of just a single stream development team, we've now split into 4. As this project is hitting its maturity level. So, COPE, create once, publish everywhere. Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
So is your code document published to your internet, or do you archive that somewhere and just publish out your internet video clip?
We publish out the cleaned up, finalized documents. The COPE document, the Sprint Accomplishments document, that one stays within the team's folders. It's very much an internal document that only the project team has access to, because it's kind of a hot mess. We understand it, and that's good enough. This is the other thing that we learn as Agile business analysts. You only write enough documentation to be enough, right? Because you're busy moving on to the next thing. And this is that just enough document. It's not necessarily meant for public consumption.
So the internal facing is code, and then just cherry pick what you need for these other
Yes.
library items.
Yes, you have the Sprint Accomplishments document. The COPE part of it is abstracting it into all of the public-facing or internally public-facing elements. Which again, if you want to talk about different ways of reaching an audience, we've got video, we've got an intranet site, we've got an encyclopedia, we've got a checklist, Judy, we've got release notes, right? Next, and this is my favorite, is gamification. Everybody likes to make a game. And remember when I said, you were the one who talked about you have to get in and do things. Any opportunity that we have to get individuals working with the new system, seeing the new system, interacting with the information that we're sending them, we have an opportunity to make a connection. So here's a couple of things that we have done. Jeopardy is an actual PowerPoint full-on version of the Jeopardy game. We use it during training at the conclusion of 4 days of very intense end-user training. We put some of the highlights of their training into Jeopardy questions or Jeopardy answers. I'm not a Jeopardy player. We put them into Jeopardy answers, and at the end of the training, the users break up into teams and they play Jeopardy for prizes that are appropriate to wherever they're at. Did you have a question? No, okay. The first time that we rolled this out for our end user training, actually, I say this was end users, but this was our super users. This was our first train the trainers session on our new tool. We rolled it out in Cartagena and Barranquilla, Colombia in February. And let me tell you, some of the individuals sent pictures back to Kansas City of the training in the room. Not all of us got to go to it. They got super competitive. They were really excited. And they were even more excited when someone remembered what they were doing in the new tool. You know, what is the process for XYZ? How would you solve this problem? You know, and when they participated that way and everyone got into it, the participants felt successful. They were engaged. It was a stress relief because 4 days of learning a new operating system is really, really hard. And not everything worked right? So one of our tech leads who happens to live in Ecuador had gone to Colombia for that, and she was sitting in the back of the room typing notes furiously the entire week as they encountered things. So again, Agile environment, we were able to take the feedback right from the super user training and say, okay guys, these are the things that we need to take a look at. And then we could prioritize, triage, backlog them appropriately, but at least we had it. And bonus, we could go back with all of that feedback that we received, not only from the Jeopardy game, what training stuck with them, but also what did they experience, we could come back, triage it, and then we can return to them and say, here's what we did with your feedback. This item has been added to the backlog as a high priority item. This is going to have to wait until the whole project is done and we'll treat it like an enhancement. This, we have a better way to train you on it. And now, the trainees, in this case the super users, know that they were heard and we held ourselves accountable. So we went back to them and said, this is how we used your feedback. I think making people feel heard by demonstrating how you incorporated whatever their feedback was is super important to validating that experience. When you talk about getting over that 18-month hurdle, people need to know that they're being listened to, because those individual contributors are rarely going to have that opportunity to provide input directly to the project team, because there's a whole lot of layers between the person on the phone and me, who's writing stories for the next iteration, right? The next one is trivia contests. This is the way that we get them to read the intranet site. So when we put up new content on the intranet, especially if there's something significantly changing, for example, new terminology. In the old world, when a child left our programs, they were quote unquote dropped. And depending on whose language you're talking to, sometimes drop sounds pretty negative, has a negative connotation. So we've changed that terminology to departed. Then there was an entire subcontext around, well, does departed mean deceased or does departed mean just left? And it's okay, we landed on departed. So when a child leaves our programs, they have departed or they have graduated, which is really where we want them to be, right? So terminology changes. Everybody's got to get used to the terminology change, right? So we will put trivia contests up on the intranet site, and at the end of the article or on a sidebar, we will say, go play this trivia contest. All of the correct answers, thank you, all the correct answers can be submitted, and we will give prizes. They collect all of the correct answers, and just like they do on the NPR shows, they pick some random person out of all of the accumulated correct answers, and that person wins a gift card or something locally contextualized, meaning we might not give the same kind of a gift in India that we would give to someone in the US. You know, we might take them out to lunch or something like that, right? The third one, and this is the one that I actually kind of like the best, is a jigsaw puzzle. You wouldn't think that a jigsaw puzzle would be so terribly interactive, but consider this. You've got a complex new user interface that you need your users to really get used to seeing. So you go online, you take a screenshot of your user interface, you mangle it up as a jigsaw puzzle, and now you ask them to start putting all the pieces in place, right? It's not hard. A 27-piece puzzle takes 5 minutes tops if you're slow like me and distracted. 2.5 minutes, but what's happening? They're paying attention. Okay, I see login is in the upper right-hand corner. I see this element is in the upper left-hand corner. I see this is what, and as they construct that picture, they are also familiarizing themselves with that user interface. So they see it again and again and again, instinctively. Our marketing team started this when they took a favorite picture that they've been putting out on LinkedIn. If you follow Children International on LinkedIn, we put posts out all the time. And they'll take their favorite picture of the week and then they'll put it on the intranet and say, here, play our puzzle, right? So that jigsaw puzzle is an amazingly ingenious way to get people to interact with something that otherwise would have been a static image. Training is not the same thing as a sandbox. Training, you go sit in a room, you get assigned a username, or maybe you come in with the username and the user security role that you will have. You do training and you go back to your desk. And maybe that tool is waiting for you when you get back to your desk, and maybe it's not. In our case, it's going to be a few months yet, So what we want is a sandbox environment to supplement the training. So what our care team is doing right now, we're still in train the trainer mode because we're still training our super users, and we are still rolling out new features as we go. So what is today is not what we will have by the end of this year. We don't want to start training our care team reps until they are actually going to be in the system every single day. So that is tricky. That's why I say slow, slow, slow. You want to start planning your training right from day one so that whoever is going to be doing your corporate training can build their training because they need time to do that. You need to be thinking about what are the user roles and the security roles and get all those set up. That takes time to do. You cannot do that in a mad rush the week before training. So it's going to feel like nothing is happening, and then all of a sudden the dam will break and someone will say, it's time to do training. And then suddenly you're expected to have that ready to go. In our case, our super user training was going to require that we bring people in who needed passports. So we had to be thinking about who we were going to send to Colombia to super user training months in advance, right? So that they could get visas, so that they could get their passports. That may not always be a thing for you, but you may still have to secure a hotel room or a conference room or something like that that is off-site because you simply don't have the capability of delivering that training in your office, right? All of those things are logistics that take time to figure out. After all that training has happened, your users are going to go back and they need to continue to practice those skills. But if your tool isn't ready yet, and in this case it's not, what we're doing is providing a sandbox environment where we have put dummy data, and then our care team instructor is following up with weekly exercises. So they did their training, and then the following week they have a homework item. Try this on your own. Try establishing a new sponsor payment schedule. Or the super users in Colombia, try registering a child. Walk through the process. Try graduating a child from the program. What happens if the family moves out of the area and we can no longer receive our services? We have to depart that child. Try departing the child. So not only have they had their training, but now we're giving them homework. At some point this week, go in and try to do this task. And it keeps that training relatively fresh so that it's not a shock when you do finally get to the end. So all of this is to say, we're trying to make that entire change management process less traumatic by the time we get to the end, right? Wrapping this up, because I know I've only got a few minutes left. Everything can be taken from that first document. If you work smarter, not harder, you can give yourself a shorthand way of getting all the information that you need and then picking the pieces, cherry picking, someone referred to it. You can cherry pick all of the pieces that you need and deliver them in the right way to the right audience at the right time. That allows you to gamify, give it a sandbox environment. You can go to informational meetings. I, as the product owner, could ask, could I go to your department meeting and talk to your team, and let's call it an Ask Me Anything session. Ask me questions. I'm on the project team. I'll answer what I can answer. I'll take what feedback you have. And if I don't have the answer, at least I can go back and I understand what your question is and I can take it back up. It's constant engagement. It's relationship management with all of your stakeholders. Okay, so to summarize this whole thing, first of all, have your plan from day one. Plans are important, but they never survive first contact with the enemy. Build mechanisms to increase your chances of success. Think about figuring out how people learn and meet them where they are. Are they tactile? Are they visual? Do they need to talk it out? Right? Look for those opportunities. Find the promotable people, right? And give them some exposure. This is a great opportunity to engage those project champions. And then make sure that you're crafting all of those messages in a variety of different ways, because we're never going to hit everybody at 100% with one style of message. So, I always like nightstand reading. If you feel like putting yourself to sleep, I realize this is too small to read on the screen. That's semi-intentional because these are all places that you could go to get more information about change management. But the first place that I'm going to direct you to is the IIBA Digital Library. How many people knew we had a digital library? Ooh, not nearly enough. Okay, first of all, go to iiba.org when you get out of this session and settle down for your next one. Go to iiba.org, log in the upper right-hand corner, search for digital library. 11,000 business books are at your disposal, including older copies of the PMBOK from PMI and other places, and some change management texts. 11,000 business books available for you to read online. So there's your tip of the day. Also, I like training from the back of the room, which is a whole technique around constructing training that meets people where they are at. And there's also a ADCAR. ADCAR is a specific set of, it goes into the psychology. ADCAR is a methodology towards change management. And QR code. This will take you directly to the slides, and the slides should have live hyperlinks. So grab it, bookmark it. Let's see. And while I'm looking at this, what worked and what didn't? Something always doesn't work. 5 minutes. Did we hit this? I'm just gonna ask, did we hit what worked and what didn't to your satisfaction?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Conquering change management. Gauging interest? Is that, did I hit all the high points for you guys? The 18 months. You had the question about the 18-month horizon. How was that for you?
That's good.
Okay. Fueling yourself. Okay, 5 minutes. This is really important, and I'm sorry I skipped this. Keeping stakeholders engaged and buy-in. I think we kind of hit that, so let me talk about fueling yourself. It's hard. We started this in a pandemic. We signed on with a vendor. They're excellent. Our vendor technically knows their stuff, and that helps. We hired a change management professional to help us manage messaging. That helps. Take all your vacation. Take all your vacation. And if you can reasonably get away with it, use PTO for mental health days too. This is hard. Be kind to yourself. But also, your partners are going through that same thing, so be kind to them too. Push back on those stupid ass 60-hour work weeks, because who wants to work those, right? That is nothing but a recipe for burnout. And if they don't believe you at first, project sponsors are eager to get the job done. Keep pushing back on it. Keep banging that drum. Because if you're not fueling yourself and you're burning yourself out, the project velocity is going to slow down. And the negativity is going to seep through. Even if you are making progress, even if you are doing all of the things right. One of the things that I think has made a huge difference in my world is that nonprofit is an entirely different vibe. I spent 16 years in financial services working for type A personalities and mutual funds and 401ks, and the vibe in the nonprofit world is entirely different. We have a higher mission, and our mission is to get more money in the hands of our field offices so they can help more kids. It's to make sure that our systems work great so that our care team reps can be coaxing a sponsor into sponsoring 2 kids instead of just 1. We need our technology systems to not be a distraction to the mission. But we also can't execute that mission if we kill ourselves in the process. Refueling yourself? I play D&D. I whack things with an imaginary sword. Yeah! I cross-stitch until I end up having to take out 12 hours worth of work. They call that frogging, because you rip it. Then I have to put it aside for a while. I do jigsaw puzzles, which is a new thing for me, right? I try to take long walks And if I can't take a long walk, I work at home in the nice weather. If I have 15 minutes between meetings, I go out the door, I go down to the end of the block, and I come back. And if I need to wait to turn my camera back on until my face is a little less puffy and sweaty, that's okay. So take those breaks, take those brain breaks, and be kind to yourselves. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't give a whole lot of time for questions, but like I said, I am on LinkedIn and I am easy to find. I would love to have your feedback. I would also love to hear any additional techniques you'd like me to mention sometime in the future. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here.
Don't forget about the session evaluations, please. Those are really important to us. Thank you for coming.
Connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with Children International, children.org. Couldn't be any easier to find us. So even if all you want to do is see lots of pictures of really cute kids, because they're so cute. They're so cute. All right, have a great day, everybody.